Welcome back to Local Decision. I'm Rusty Ray, and we're joined now by Blaine City Council member Andy Garvais out of Ward 3, seeking your second term.
Correct.
And this time running as the incumbent versus 4 years ago, kind of new to that process. What's been the difference so far?
I think the difference is in talking to residents as we go out and do our lit drops and things, is just having a background and being able to speak about, what we have done over the last 4 years and having a little more context in the questions that they ask, and, the problems that they bring up and the things that they want to see in Blaine, just knowing more about, the process of Blaine and what we are doing and have done.
Is it a change in being able to not necessarily promise certain things, but giving a more realistic answer, perhaps as a challenger or as someone new to the process, or in some cases filling a seat that's retiring or something like that? You may not have that context like you talked about. Your opponent may have very similar ideals, but as an incumbent, you're coming from a different perspective.
Exactly. I think it's being able to provide things in context, and I think it's being able to make promises that you're able to actually achieve, and not just make blank statements that seem good. I think it's important to know that some of the issues that Blaine deals with are really complex and multifaceted, and it's not as simple as adding 20 officers to the police force. There's multifaceted elements to that, and so knowing how we approach those problems and develop our solutions is important.
Solutions that people might say to you or that you might hear in the political arena are, like you mentioned, maybe more police officers or keeping taxes low, but then again, extending services or expanding services or providing or maintaining the things that you've even identified, that the amenities that people like about living in the city, or more options for leisure, retail, whatever the case may be. That balance, I can't even begin to understand that balance. And someone who's been on the council now for 4 years, what is that balance like of providing but also keeping costs down?
That's a great question. It's super complex. I know a lot of people have said, Blaine City budget continues to go up year after year, and we got to put a stop to that. But the truth of the matter is there's no way to put a stop to that unless you cut or remove services. We have contractually obligated step increases for union staff, and like our police department, and those employees are entitled to that, right? And so every year we kind of look at our budget and what our tax rate is, and I'm proud that we have the lowest cost of government when you look at comparable cities our size, like Eden Prairie and Maple Grove, and even most of the cities in Anoka County. We're at the bottom for the cost of government, and our tax rate has remained flat over the last 3 years, and actually even dropped a very small fraction of a percent. But we look at all the competing interests. We look at how can we do things more efficiently to save money and either give that back to the taxpayers, or use that money for the increases that we need to engage in, like more officers or new equipment for SBM Fire. I think in COVID, our response when we had a $2.1 million deficit that we were facing, there was a lot of things that we did in partnership with the residents. The Adopt a Park program, where residents would go out and clean up their neighborhood parks, was a great way for us to save money in an effort to have a cost savings to match the deficit that we were facing.
Both times that he's been here, your opponent has mentioned looking at ways that the city offers incentives for development and for economic investment by industry specifically, and re-examining that. And I've asked him about that, and he's kind of explained it, but is that a viable option, do you think, for the city? Because the city wants to attract certain kinds of development for the tax base and for other reasons. The county certainly encourages economic development, a lot of push there, even with COVID. Is that a viable option, you think, to kind of tinker with the incentives that the city can offer?
Yeah, and I think the cities, we have been really conservative in the incentives that we offer to developers and businesses that want to come to Blaine. We know that Blaine is a great city that people do want to develop and bring their businesses to. And a lot of our work is more just meeting with them and showing them what Blaine has to offer. For example, we had tried to get a restaurant on the corner of Lexington and 125th, and the landowner and their land broker were having issues, and we said, well, give us your top 3 restaurants that were interested. We'll sit down with them, and I sat down with them and our economic development director, and we just talked to them about this location, the growth that was already approved and the growth that you could expect to see, and they were ecstatic, and they were going to put a business there. And then, before they finalized the deal, COVID kicked off, and that changed the restaurant industry and everyone's outlook on expanding. So I think we're really conservative with the TIF that we offer businesses. The last TIF that we approved was for Crown Iron Works off of 35W, and the reason we look at those on a case-by-case basis, and it's really about what does this project bring to Blaine. And when you're going to bring high-quality engineer jobs and a global headquarters into Blaine, there's a lot of value into that. And then we look at the project, and is this project feasible for this business to do, or is there some assistance needed? Like if a business wanted to go in there, but there was a lot of remediation work because it used to be a gas station or something like that, we take that all into consideration, and we really use the pay-go bonds, which does not obligate the city to pay the bond if there isn't revenues generated from the increase in property taxes. And TIF, just for the residents out there, I mean, it's super complicated to explain, and we don't have time here, but that is not our residential property tax dollars. We're not taking money from Andy or our neighbors' property taxes that we pay to incentivize developers. It's the increase that they actualize on their property.
It's fantastic what Crown Ironworks has been able to do. We've been there to cover the opening and talk to the folks involved there. Certainly you've been involved with that, but it may not get the attention that a storefront or a new restaurant in Lexington and 125th or a big box that could be rumored to be coming out that way. It doesn't get the attention from maybe the average Blaine citizen or the average citizen of any city. So it's understanding that complexity for city leaders and for the people that you're talking to, and understanding the value in that for the city that can be pretty important.
It is important, and we go after businesses that bring good jobs in addition to those big names that people want to see, the good restaurants. And I think it's important to understand that there's not a whole lot that Blaine can do to stop the growth. Landowners have a right to sell their properties to a developer, and a developer, if it's zoned appropriately, has a right to put a business there. And so we're really proactive, staff and some of the council members, in trying to seek out and get the businesses that Blaine residents want to see. We met with Whole Foods, and they were super interested in building a store, a smaller concept store that they were kicking off in Blaine. And then 2 weeks later, Amazon purchased Whole Foods, and it kind of changed their marketing game and how they were going to expand. So those are still discussions that we have with a lot of businesses that people mention, online, and when we talk to them in person, we're still actively seeking out those businesses.
Okay, so I'm not avoiding COVID. Let's talk about it. Obviously, it's top of mind for a lot of people, whether it's just planning things for their family, but for city government, do you feel like it's put on hold anything that the city needs to continue its work on or needed to tackle in the second half of 2020 that COVID, for all probably the right reasons, has kind of put on hold? Is there anything still there that the city needs to address?
I don't believe so. When we faced the budget deficit, we enacted a lot of different policies, for example, no conferences for staff, reducing traveling, capital expenditures that weren't critical were put on hold. We're delaying the purchase of new equipment so we could kind of see how the budget shaked out with the property tax revenues that came in. But anything that was really critical, whether it was a road project or hiring police officers definitely moved forward. You know, we had a hiring freeze in the city of Blaine, but that didn't apply to the police department, and so they continue to actively recruit and go through their hiring processes, which, you know, right now they have 4 positions that they're continuing to fill. So anything that was critical, it didn't stop us. You know, we rely on our reserves for that. We just kind of delayed the things that we thought could have been delayed.
Looking forward to the playbook for, you know, what comes out of COVID, the learning from COVID for leaders, city leaders, state leaders, county leaders. I've had the chance to ask this of a couple of county leaders already. Where does the playbook begin? What's the first chapter of when you kind of go back and have a review of COVID and how it was handled? What do you think the first chapter, the first most important lesson has been?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you that the playbook is being written as we go. You know, the city and a lot of local governments have an all hazards plan in place for different things, but it didn't really address a global pandemic though, and policy initiatives from federal and state governments that would, you know, cripple economies. And so as we respond to that, we're taking note of what is working and what isn't necessarily working as efficiently. And I think Blaine has done an amazing job. A lot of cities have actually reached out to our Blaine staff to say, how are you handling this situation? So I think I would say that the number one lesson to be learned is to stay in touch with your business community and really partner with them, because it's critical that they play a role in protecting the public by implementing, you know, heightened cleaning procedures and expanding restaurants, expanding to more outdoor dining, which is open air. But it's also important for us to receive feedback from them on how they're doing and their viability, so that we can take important steps like taking the federal CARES money and developing programs that are efficiently getting those funds out to them. And so that's what we're doing. We have, you know, about 25 different businesses that have applied for the $10,000 grants, and so we're working on getting those out. And then the second round of applications, we're looking at expanding those to sole proprietorship shops like the barber shop, and also developing a program for nonprofits. And those individuals, we had about 5 businesses that applied and weren't eligible on the first round. On the second round, when we make them eligible, they won't have to reapply. We'll take the original application and move them forward.
Seems like a great opportunity for folks at City Hall, whether it's staff or council or other appointed or elected positions, to really get to know these business owners and really see the breadth of what is available and what's located in the city. Even in a time like this, it's a chance to kind of be acquainted with that. That's got to be a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's an amazing opportunity to touch base with our businesses and see how they're doing. And I think the council and city staff have really made it a priority to stay in touch with businesses and understand what their needs are. And then we've adapted and made policy changes to fit those, like the rapid expansion of outdoor dining. And then usually when someone puts up a tent outside, there's a tent fee, an inspection fee, and we waived all of those fees just to try to get them up and running and stay open. And you know, that is a large concern of ours. I spoke with our development director, Eric Thorvig, just Tuesday about this issue. And going into the fall and the winter months, it's a concern, and so we're looking at new ways to keep our restaurants open.
What about you personally, looking ahead? If you get another 4 years there, are there things that you started in your first term that you want to continue? Or is there something that you didn't quite get to because of COVID or whatever else in the first 2 or 3 years that you didn't quite get to, that you had talked about leading into your first race, that you want to see try to make happen in the second time around?
I don't think there's anything that I necessarily didn't get to. The things that I said I would do in my first term, I've done. I just want to do more of them. You know, we've focused on our Parks and Recs department, expanding our trail system in parks and getting 5 and 10 year capital replacement plans in place for the parks and public works, which is important. If you're going to really figure out where you're at financially in the outlook of the city for 5 and 10 years down the road, you need to know what equipment you have, the lifespan of that equipment, and when it needs to be replaced. So that was an accomplishment, and I want to continue to expand our trail system so we're connected. continue to support public safety. I mean, we've added 10 officers over the last 4 years, and we just did a staffing study with the police department, and so now we have some really in-depth analysis on where we want to be. The study said that we're good with the amount of officers we have, but when you look at the policy decisions on where we want to be in increasing community policing, we have some positions we'd like to add there. SBM Fire, we've constantly added equipment. As soon as I was elected, that's when the water went out, and we've invested millions of dollars in our infrastructure and redundant monitoring systems so that doesn't happen again. And we've continued to engage in smart growth. Like I said, growth is going to happen in Blaine, and if we try to stop that, we can be sued by landowners and developers who have a right to develop their properties, but we've actively engaged with the businesses that we want to see in Blaine so we can patronize and spend our money there, and the types of businesses that will bring great jobs into Blaine.
Okay, Andy, thank you for coming by today. We're going to have to leave it right there.
All right, thank you so much, Rusty.
Okay.